With that, open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. By the way, those of you who appreciate the scriptures on the screen when I preach, I kind of drive the person responsible for putting that on the screen crazy, because so many times I change it because my sermons are a work in progress. Whatever I feel led to change it, even though I gave them the scriptures shortly before I actually preach, sometimes I've changed in the last minute. So if you appreciate that, we'll continue providing that for you on the screen. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. And darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And I've been preaching off and on the last, I guess about 2 months now, on the gap theory. And I've been clear, I believe I've been clear, proclaiming that the gap theory is a bunch of phooey, because it has serious theological problems. And once again, just like I had to wipe the slate clean, because I never really looked that much into it, I just took some other preachers and teachers' word for it and assumed what they were saying was correct. But then I did a deep dive as a biblical detective, and I start seeing the problems with it. And it does have serious theological problems. Now, when you read Genesis 1 and 2, gap people assert that fossils formed during this gap, which they state is between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. Long before Adam and Eve were created. And if you're a gap theorist, I really think you're denying the foundation of the gospel principle that death is the penalty of sin. And when you dig around the ground, if you go deep enough, and sometimes you don't even have to go that deep. I remember I was in a geological field trip, and we went to a location that was fairly close to the Grand Canyon, not in the Grand Canyon, but fairly close to the Grand Canyon, off the beaten path. No one ever roaming around in those areas we were at. And it didn't take very long to find dinosaur bones. Many of those fossils, along with the bones, are just mineralized bones of dead animals. That's all it is. So you really think about it. It didn't work out the first time, according to the gap theory people. Tens of millions of years ago, and sometime between Cro-Magnon, man-like features, and what we, as biblical detectives, called Adam beings, sin. Of course, they believe because of Satan's rebellion, because all gap theorists believe that Satan sinned before Adam. The question is that true? It could be, or maybe it couldn't be. Well, are you going to cover that, you might ask? We're going to take a look at it. Not tonight. It'll be mostly speculative, but we're still going to take a look at it and the possibilities. I'll let you know when I have evidence and when it's opinion. Everybody else has opinion. Why can't we? If death occurred long before the creation of Adam and Eve, then we have to assume that Adam's sin did not bring death into the world. And now we have a better understanding what that word world means. We covered that last time. I look at the word cosmos and cosmio. Go to Romans 5:12. Romans 5:12 reads, "Wherefore as by one man's sin," referring to Adam. It doesn't say Adam and Eve. And it doesn't say Satan or anyone else. By one man's sin entered into the world, or cosmos. And as I mentioned last time in the teaching, the order of creation. Wherefore, as by one man's sin entered into the order of creation, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. One thing it doesn't say here in this verse, wherefore as by one man's sin entered into the cosmos, and death by sin. Now after that last word sin that I just read, it doesn't say again, does it? It doesn't read, wherefore as by one man's sin entered the world, and death by sin again. Adam was responsible for the order of creation that was assigned to him under the Godhead. In other words, God and His only begotten Son. Was Satan responsible for all the living beings? If you're a gap theorist, prior, the way they interpret the word in Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, the earth became without form and void. I guess God didn't have enough of that, so He's going to try it again one more time. Why didn't He send His only begotten Son the first go around? If we didn't evolve from apes, if you're a gap theorist, then how do you explain there's not that much evidence, but there's a little bit of evidence that points to some type of walking creature that both the scientific world and some gap theorists proclaimed that was the early signs of what was to become eventually man. Not all gap theorists believe that, but definitely the scientific world. Is this just a big do-over because it didn't work the first time around? And God didn't care about that first creative beings that He created. He just wiped them all out without any hope. And if Satan was the leader of the band in that rebellion before the earth became without form and void, why didn't God wipe him out then? Like He's going to, which declares in His Word that's still yet to happen, but it's going to be done. I mean, I could go on all night with the what ifs. If sin in some millions of years ago, tens of millions of years ago, was around, then Adam's sin in this verse did not bring death into the cosmos. Why? Because death would have already been in the cosmos. Romans 5:12 says something different. Not just Romans 5:12, you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Let's read verse 21 and 22. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead, the second Adam. For as in Adam all died, all die, even so in Christ shall be made alive by every man. Verse 23, it's not on the screen, in his order. Now, it indicates, these verses that I've read, that Adam's sin brought death into the cosmos. A huge weight was on Adam. When Eve took a bite of that fruit, whatever it was, how come her eyes wasn't open immediately? How come she did not feel the humiliation and disgrace that she brought on herself, and more importantly, the sin that she committed against God? We don't have a record of that. And of course, preachers try to explain it away by, oh, Eve was sinned and Adam was right there and it happened almost within minutes. They come up with so many different excuses to try to explain these verses away. It was not until Adam rebelled in sin for things to start to change in their lives, in every life, in every part of creation from that point on. So the question you have to ask, whatever the serpent was, and we know in the scriptures Satan, his name was not Satan before he fell, was in the garden. And everything that God created, if you go back to Genesis, was very good. And he was satisfied with it. There's no mention of Satan in that progression. You go back to Genesis. You don't have the scriptures. This is how I drive people crazy back there, because I don't give them time to prepare. But you don't have to go, because I'm not going to dwell on this. You go back to Genesis. (1:31), and God saw everything that he had made. Everything. Because it starts off with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that would include everything in it. And God saw that everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. This happened when? At the conclusion of the 6th day. And in the evening, and the morning were the 6th day. And I've had you circle this word before if you've been around this ministry for a while. The word good in that verse 31. I see they got on it. Good job. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very, literally, pleasing. Everything in creation, in the heavens and the earth, was pleasing. At the conclusion of this 6th day of the 7 days of creation. Either God's a liar, or Satan at this point didn't fall yet. We'll get into that. Thought I'd just dangle that out there for you. Now, there's been some that have suggested that Adam's sin only brought human death into the world. We know that's not true. Because the scriptures indicate that God instituted animal death. He provided animal skins. Once Adam and Eve fell, and they saw their nakedness, not just their spiritual nakedness, but also physical nakedness. And God slain an animal, obviously, because it's animal skins that clothe them from that point on in response to their sin. You see that in Genesis 3. It's either verse 20 or 21. You can look that up yourself. The only conclusion we have then, that God must have killed an animal or animals to provide clothing, skins, as a covering. So Adam's sin not only affected both Adam and Eve, in this case, but also included animals. And why? And Adam's been dying ever since, because Adam, once again, was given authority over them. His deeds, in this case, the act of rebellion against God, affected all that was under his authority. So if that's true, the fossils of animals, no matter what they are, had to form sometime after Adam's sin. If you read the verses that we just read, and not before. Let me read you something. When you look at Romans 8, verse 20 and 22, you can go there. I think I gave you those verses. It reads, "For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who had subjected the same in hope. Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now." As far as verse 20 goes, it says, "For the creature is made subject to vanity." Vanity is equivalent to futility. Because of sin, the creation was made to operate under a law which specifies a universal process of decay and death. This law is recognized by science as a basic principle pervading the whole universe. It is called the law of increasing entropy, meaning turning inward, turning on itself, in other words, or the second law of thermodynamics. Every system in the physical and biological worlds has a tendency to run down, disintegrate, and die unless it somehow becomes open to outside sources of energy, such as information or food, etc. Even if it does remain an open system, this eternal tendency continues to act in opposition to the upcoming energy. Even the external energy will eventually be exhausted, so the whole creation is thus in bondage to the principle of futility or in vainness. But since this law has been imposed by God, He also can remove it. And so there still is hope. When we read verse 8:21, we see that the verse says, "Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption." Corruption is equivalent to decay, and this is yet another way of stating the entropy principle. Everything tends to decay, running down from the created states of organized complexity to one of randomness and disorganized chaos. This law is thus called a bondage. The universe is enslaved by it, and there's no natural principle available to supersede it. Such a law is clearly the exact opposite of the notion of evolution, which views the universe as gradually organizing itself over long ages by natural processes into its present state of high complexity and activity. The entropy law, which is supported without exception by all observation and scientific study, thus seems to stipulate that the evolution on any significant scale is impossible. It also explains the fact that it has never been observed to occur in the present, and the fact there is no evidence that it ever occurred in the past. We read verse 22, "For we know that the whole creation groaneth in travail and pain together until now." The reference to whole creation indicates the divine curse extends to the entire created cosmos, not just to the earth. Scientific observation has apparently confirmed this. That is, the law of entropy operates throughout the cosmos. It was man's sin that brought God's curse on the ground. That is, the very elements of the created earth and the dust of the ground, out of which all things were made by God. It may be that his sin had universal repercussions as well. A lot was put on Adam's shoulders. A lot was expected of him. But he walked and talked with God. He was an imperfect being that was empowered by God, his own energy, made in his image. I am so tired of listening to people preach and make a reference that we're made in God's image. No, we're not. I'm sorry, we're not. We have some attributes still left of that. But we're made in the image of Adam after sin. If we were made in God's image, we would have been born like Adam when he originally was created. But that didn't happen because of Adam's sin. We're getting back to that. Thank God. There is hope in his promises. But that's still future. We're looking in the past right now. We're looking in the past. We find fossils and we find evidence in these fossils, the bones, of disease in them. Some have cancer. Some have arthritis and other things. Disease is a result of the curse that God placed on the cosmos as a result of Adam's sin. I don't believe. I think God's word lays it out, as I keep laying it out. Death and disease would not already been in the cosmos when God created Adam and Eve. Why? I repeat, because the Bible strongly indicates that the cosmos was very pleasing. Everything created in the heavens and the earth. When the Lord finished creating it on the sixth day, he found it all very pleasing. You mean Satan too? Well, he wasn't Satan before the fall. We'll see. We'll see. I don't want to end it tonight. And you don't have these verses, so don't even worry about putting them up because I'm going to read them real quick. I think I gave you enough food for thought for one night. You continue reading in Romans 8. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. The whole creation. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. For we are saved by hope. But hope that is not seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why doeth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we see not, then we do with patience or endurance waits for it. Likewise, he helps. Likewise also, he helpeth our infirmities, for we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit itself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. You mean I have to go out and speaking in tongues fit for the Spirit to groan it for me, knowing what it's missing and know what we still are promised? Absolutely. I used to get so frustrated. People used to tell me, I don't have the Holy Spirit in me because I don't speak in tongues. Oh, you fool. I can't wait to get on that subject. He maketh intercession for the saints according to his purpose. And actually in verse 27, according to the will of God. Because all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose, or his plan of displaying something. And he has a plan to display us. Adam-like beings were restored once again to God's original purposes and planned before sin entered into the equation and we became cursed. Well, thank God Jesus has removed that curse, but not all is fulfilled yet. But the day is coming, and it's coming sooner and sooner. It's at the door, when God will set things straight. And man could move forward from that period on what God originally had planned for him to accomplish, to rule and to reign throughout all of the cosmos, in my opinion. And I'll give you reasons why in the months ahead. But for now, that's where we're going to leave it. God's in control, my friend. And he knows what he's doing. And this creation that he's going to reorder once again to be pleasing unto him is coming soon. Be ready for it. It starts with putting your trust in life in Jesus' hands. Now I want to hear from you. Play a song.